This is a difficult thing that we're doing. It's a hard thing. It's a new thing. And, I'd hope that you cheer us on.
3, 2, 1, and liftoff.
I think this is a really good milestone for future spaceflight. I think it's another step towards the stars.
Elon Musk is not your average tech billionaire. He's one of the most intriguing entrepreneurs in business today. The man behind PayPal is taking on the giants of the aerospace and motor industries, along with the oil corporations, the energy utility companies, and winning.
Elon Musk is a visionary, someone who comes along perhaps once a century, who is actually changing the way we function and the way we look at the world.
Back then, people were still afraid to buy books online, so putting together a financial services suite on the internet was a rather revolutionary idea, and that company turned out to be PayPal, the online payment service.
It's one thing to run a company that's worth $1 billion. Elon Musk has 4.
My personal ideology is kind of split right now between trying to be helpful on Earth-related stuff, which is sustainable energy, and then trying to advance space technology so we can establish a self-sustaining city on Mars.
From AI to disrupting the car industry to Solar City. I mean, how many other people can say, I have my own rocket company? Not many.
In terms of space, Elon's completely changed how we think about everything.
When you look at what SpaceX has done with their reusable rockets, we are seeing science fiction of the 1950s coming to life. Rockets land as they always were meant to do.
It's really trying to land on a postage stamp there.
Astonishingly difficult. So Mars does beckon.
I am very convinced this is going to happen in my lifetime.
You look at Tesla alone, it's changed the way that automobiles will be forever in the future.
He's truly broken down the wall that was impossible to break. And now we're in a situation where all of the big car companies are switching massively to electric cars. And that is a revolution done by one man.
He's almost like a real-life Iron Man in what he's doing.
There's a lot more that will happen before his story is over, so I think we just get to watch and be excited and see what comes next.
A lot of people think that successful entrepreneurs are just happen to be in the right place at the right time with the right product or right service. That's untrue. Why are they not content with 25 million when they sell the first company, then go into a second company for another 50 million, or a third company where they fail and go into another one? Serial entrepreneurs are driven. They're psychologically driven, and it's usually to do with something in their childhood.
Elon Reeve Musk was born in Pretoria in 1971, the son of a Canadian mother and South African father.
Elon grew up in South Africa, and he had a very unfettered upbringing. He has said that, he was raised basically by books and occasionally nannies. His mother and father have 2 other kids. There he has a younger brother and sister, Kimball and Tosca. But it seemed like Elon didn't have a lot of adult supervision. He said that he was basically out there building explosives and learning about conduction with very little supervision.
He had a passion for engineering and obviously physics and the sciences as well.
Musk attended Waterkloof Primary School, and after his parents divorced, 9-year-old Elon went to live with his father.
Elon, at one stage in his childhood, after his parents divorced, said that he felt sorry for his dad living by himself, so he opted to go and live with his dad. That he later called a huge mistake.
He's been on record saying he didn't have a great relationship with his father.
He's notably said some really hard things about his dad. It sounds like it was a really awful situation.
His father was an engineer, and Elon says that a lot of his engineering nous came from his father, and his father had some issues, according to Elon, but what he did have was a very incisive engineering background.
As disturbing as Elon's relationship with his dad seemed to be, Elon's relationship with his mother appears to be very good and went from strength to strength.
I think his mother is probably the ultimate optimist. She's lovely. She's really something. Open the New York Times, there's May. It's great.
I've been modeling for 50 years. So you just have to just keep on going, be nice and available, and be surprised when you suddenly become mother of the bride and then grandmother.
Elon's mum has been very supportive of him over the years. She's constantly outspoken on Twitter, telling us all the wonders of Elon, and she's clearly very proud of him.
May Musk is an incredible woman. At something like 69, she's called an it girl by Vanity Fair. She's an in-demand model who's doing campaigns for big major brands all over the world. She's one of the most glamorous older women you will ever see. Despite the fact that Elon says he tried repeatedly again and again and again to try and repair his relationship with his father, at this stage he's just given up because he doesn't believe his dad is capable of change. He's talked openly about how as a child he spent a lot of time alone. He says he can still remember the sound of an empty house, footsteps far off in the distance, and he never ever wanted that again.
My own view is the really stellar entrepreneurs, their life experiences, particularly in childhood, are the determinant of their success later on. If you look at their early childhood experiences, you will find a number of adverse events, substantial adverse events, like school bullying or being rejected. So these events drive you. You now need to prove something. You want to gain control of a world, again, you didn't have control of when you were younger. And moving toward a top job, being an entrepreneur, being a CEO gives you power, gives you strength, gives you control, the thing they never had when they were younger. So I think that's a driving force in many entrepreneurs.
Elon Musk attended Bryanston High School in Pretoria, where he thrived academically.
He had quite a tough upbringing. There are some reports of bullying as well. You know, any child that shows that sort of intellect and interest might come under the glare of the bullies.
He was even hospitalized after one particular fight.
He was a nerd. He was bullied at school. At one point he was even knocked unconscious. You know, it wasn't obvious that he was a marketing genius at that point.
Elon took on wrestling classes and a bit of judo in attempts to compensate with a bit of added physicality. And then he grew up a little bit, got a growth spurt, got a bit taller, and really took the bullies head on.
After spending 3 years at Bryanston High, Elon attended Pretoria High School for Boys.
Elon attended Boys High from 1986 until 1988, which is the year he matriculated. He excelled in science and he also excelled in computer studies. He in fact got a distinction for both science and computer studies in 1988. I do recall his grades because I have them in my mark book, and he was definitely top of the science class. I've taught many boys over the years, and Elon did stick in my mind. You know, I can't tell you where every boy sat, but I can remember Elon sitting at the back of the classroom getting on with his work. He wasn't one of the boys that wanted attention all the time. We always take a lot of pride in all of the boys, but from a personal point of view, having taught Elon science, I'd like to think that I made a small input in his formative years. I've read he would like to go to Mars. I'm hoping he'll do that a lot sooner, but Star Trek style, so he can invite me there.
Elon Musk was always different. His entrepreneurial ventures started early. In 1984, a science fiction-inspired tech success gave a hint of his future when he sold his first commercial software.
He started working on computers at the age of 10, working very hard on it and being very clever in developing programs.
He developed a video game called Blaster. He famously sold this to a PC magazine for $500.
Elon was asked about what sets him apart from other people, and he himself said there were things that were very obvious to him growing up that other people didn't understand. How conduction works, how light and wires make a light switch go on. Things that to him were immediately clear and obvious, whereas other people didn't automatically, especially when they're like 14, understand what was going on.
You played a lot of chess, and as a result of that was always sort of thinking ahead. In chess, you play to think moves ahead. So even when he was younger, I think he was looking at ideas for what might make a good business in the short term, and then what could be part of a grand plan further on.
After graduating from high school, Musk briefly attended the University of Pretoria before deciding to leave South Africa.
The story of Elon Musk's wealth and his rise is tied up in part with the American dream. It was always ingrained in him that South Africa wasn't where he was going to achieve the ambitions he had. He wanted to be in America. He wanted to be part of that scene. Initially, he couldn't go directly to America, so he actually had to go through Canada.
Elon spent 2 years studying at Queen's University in Ontario.
He funded his own degrees in Canada and the US by getting scholarships and working part-time. So he didn't have a huge amount of money behind him. He has a famous university paper where he talks about wanting to conquer different areas of the world, and those included the internet, space exploration, solar energy, artificial intelligence, and brain learning interfaces as well.
Elon Musk married his childhood sweetheart. They met at university. Her name was Justine. She was absolutely beautiful. And on their first date, they were supposed to go out for ice cream. She actually said yes, and then basically ditched him and went off to do some studying instead. He didn't take no for an answer. He pursued her. He continued to pursue her. And even after Elon left the university, he attended with Justine and moved to Wharton Business School. He still sent her roses regularly. When Elon Musk is interested in you, I think he comes on like a steam train, or an electric steam train perhaps. But Elon Musk is unstoppable. He sees what he wants and he does everything he needs to do to get it. He's like that in business, and he's like that in love.
Having completed degrees in business and physics, in 1995, Musk abandoned a PhD at Stanford and headed for Silicon Valley.
He famously dropped out of his third degree at Stanford University in California after just 2 days.
He launched a company with his brother Kimball called Zip2, and it was effectively a form of online yellow pages that they sold to newspapers at the time.
And he struck lucky when the company was bought.
Well, they actually ended up selling it to Compaq for about $307 million when he was only 27 years old.
He made about $22 million back then, which is wonderful, an awful lot of money. But in typical Elon style, he recycled half of that into his next venture, and which eventually ended up becoming PayPal.
Having disrupted the traditional paper advertising industry with Zip2, Musk's next venture took on the global financial market.
He worked to set up a company called X.com, which was the precursor to what is now PayPal.
X.com was supposed to be a full-services financial services business. So it sounds sort of archaic now, but back at the time, putting together a financial services suite on the internet was a rather revolutionary idea. He had one internet win under his belt, so it was not especially challenging to bring on new engineers or new business people who wanted to work on something that seemed very exciting with someone who had already won once. So that was a big feather in his cap. It was, I think, more challenging to persuade outside investors that It was a good idea because they were not swayed by one win. It was not enough to buy public opinion in Silicon Valley. The jury was still sort of out on whether he was genius or crazy or just a big ego or how it was all going to play out. But he invested $10 or $12 million of his own money into X.com, so we didn't need a whole lot of money right off the bat. He sort of took care of all of that.
Musk was revolutionary in his strategy at X.com, gifting new customers cash rewards and creating peer-to-peer payment systems.
My initial impressions were just that he was very focused and very passionate on what he was about to do. It seemed very clear early on that Elon was not playing by the standard book of life or business or anything else. So I was just going to be along for the ride. At the beginning, Elon wasn't easy to read at all, mostly because you just had no idea how he was going to react to anything. I had no experience with someone who thought the way that he did, or talked the way that he did, or had as much confidence about what he was doing and in himself as he did. That was so foreign to me as someone who grew up in Iowa. Or maybe it's foreign to everyone, I don't know.
PayPal was voted one of the 10 worst business ideas in 1999. Elon Musk was instrumental in the company's focus on a global payment system, which would change the course of the internet.
People probably know him mostly from PayPal. That was when he really first came to public consciousness. PayPal was how are we going to turn finances into an online transaction? How are we going to make it easier? How are we going to make it more efficient?
It sounds sort of obvious now, but back then people were still afraid to buy books online, so asking them to put all their financial data in one place was not a solid proposition. The goal of the company that we were building was always trying to do something very positive for humanity. And he was thinking about space and solar panels and all of that way back then, so we knew that this was sort of a stepping stone on the way to grander dreams.
PayPal soon became the online payment system of choice, from a few thousand users multiplying to more than 1 million within months.
The person-to-person payment side of things took off so quickly that we were gaining traction like crazy. And then the online auction market took hold of it and it blew up into this huge thing, and we were adding tens of thousands of new accounts every day, which at the time was fairly unprecedented. Elon was very hands-on in all aspects of the company. It was his money, after all, that we were all playing with. So I think when it's your money on the table, it's in your best interest to be very involved in all the details. Every day was a new sort of fire, right? Every day something was burning down that needed to be addressed. We had a customer service nightmare where soon after launching the service we had thousands and thousands of emails in the queue because people didn't understand, again, the early days of the internet, they didn't understand how to get their money out. And so they would freak out and call in or email like 12 different times. So we had 2 million emails in the queue and we only had 10 customer service people dedicated to dealing with that. And so we really had no idea what we were going to do. Customer service was enormously expensive in California. And so I said, you know, this is going to sound crazy, but I have a huge extended family in the Midwest. I could train them all to do customer service at home. Elon laughed at first, and then a couple of hours later came back and said, all right, get on a plane. So I went out and taught 10 of my family members how to do customer service from home, and then my sister ended up hiring 12 stay-at-home parents in a small town in Nebraska who started all working from home. And they were so good that we ended up building a customer service center in Omaha, Nebraska, which now employs 1,800 people. And that turned out fantastic. We went from 0 to 100 people in 6 weeks out in Omaha. And that was probably the most challenging thing, but we were a little short of options, so.
Led by his passion for perfectionism, determination, and a heroic work ethic, Musk has succeeded in markets that were previously considered impossible to conquer.
He's always had higher expectations for himself than he did for other people, so he pushed himself very, very hard.
There's a lot of pressure on him because he has a lot of expectations, a lot of responsibility. to his shareholders, to the capital that he has sourced, to his staff, his colleagues. So there's a lot of demands. So you can't just say, you know what, this is all good and great. I'm just going to take 6 months off. You know, why? Because I've got 20 billion, so it's okay. No, it doesn't work like that.
As the stakes get higher and the more people that get involved, there's more pressure on that front. But I think that he looks at it and turns away.
What drives Elon, what pushes him, I don't get it, but he's making changes in the world because he doesn't ever stop and rest. He just keeps going.
Elon Musk is famous for his work ethic, which is non-stop. I think he sort of has two modes, stop and go.
He works around the clock and he expects everyone else to do the same.
Elon was up at all hours of the night working. He would send emails at midnight or 1 or 2 a.m. and just be very focused on some problem that we were trying to solve.
If you hear stories from SpaceX in the early days, people were really struggling to keep pace with him. But that's how he works, and if you can't keep pace, you're out the door.
I thought he was a good boss. And sort of infamous now that he runs through PR people very quickly. But at that time, I thought I was just going to be like a normal PR person. So Elon wasn't really going to have any of that. He expected a lot of his people, but we all expected a lot of each other. I mean, that's how you get it done. In the culture of startups, the expectation is that everybody is working all the time. You get there at 9 or 10 in the morning and not leave until 9 or 10 or maybe after that at night. And Elon was definitely working until midnight every night. That was just what we did. And it was exciting. Rarely did anyone complain about that kind of thing because you really felt like you were changing the world.
By the year 2000, Musk had married Justine Wilson.
He was always pining for Justine, who was still in Canada at that point. And so it was lovely when she came down.
The couple did suffer a tragedy very early on. Their baby boy was 10 weeks old, Nevada, when he died suddenly of SIDS. It was beyond difficult for both of them to cope with. Justine immediately sought IVF and fertility help and went on to have 5 boys, 1 set of triplets and 1 set of twin boys. So very quickly, they went from having no children to having 5. Justine has written extensively about how it caused a strain in the marriage, as it might do, as it would do. But this tragic event of losing their infant son, unfortunately didn't draw the couple closer, but rather was the beginning perhaps of what ultimately would pull them apart.
As PayPal flourished, boardroom troubles dogged Musk. And internal disagreements with the board resulted in Elon being ousted from his own company.
There was a time when Peter Thiel and Elon were co-CEOs at PayPal, but there were certain differences in opinion about the technology and the branding of the company that led to the vote of no confidence to oust Elon. And Elon, unfortunately, was in South Africa. I had just spoken with him on the phone that day. And he's like, how bad is it? And I'm like, oh, it's not that bad. And then that night I went home and I was laying in bed and I started putting together all the pieces of who I'd seen in the office and what was happening. And at about 10:30 at night, I sat straight up in bed and thought, oh, I'm sure I said some swear word at the ceiling. And I got up and I went back in the office and sure enough, everybody was there. And that was when they were doing it. They were talking to the board on the phone and ousting him, and I tried to call Elon and he was on a plane and I couldn't get him until the morning, and by then it was too late. It was already done. I'm sure there was quite a bit of unhappiness early on, but he really handled it marvelously.
Musk left PayPal, but as the largest shareholder, remained in an advisory role. His next windfall arrived in 2002, when eBay bought PayPal, leaving him wealthy beyond belief.
That was where Elon started to make some serious money.
He cashed in about $165 million. Wonderful.
What was amazing is he plowed almost all of it into these new business ventures. He didn't put any aside for himself, didn't think of sort of personal gain in the short term at least.
a lot of us would have just retired. He made the money in PayPal. He could have just stopped and, bought a place in the south of France and said, I'm retiring, I'm 28, and be done. But he ended up starting 3 other billion-dollar companies.
He took 100 million and put it into SpaceX. 70 million ended up going to Tesla and about 10 million going to Solar City.
Most people say 165 million, I'm set for life, that's it, where's the beach, let's go. Not Elon. And I have a lot of respect for that.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Elon Musk.
In 2001, Elon established the Musk Foundation, delivering solar energy systems to areas of the world struck by natural disasters. He also pledged to give away at least half of his wealth to philanthropy.
A lot of people think that entrepreneurs are driven by money, and that's why they're serial entrepreneurs. They want to make more and more. Really, after you make 50 million, you need to earn more money? Not really. That's not a good driver. They're not driven by money at all.
He's aware of it, no doubt. I mean, if you got 20 billion floating around, I'm sure you would have noticed. But I don't think that's the main driver for him. I really don't. I think he's got a bigger vision beyond this little thing called money. But money helps him execute the dream. So it is a necessary thing.
It's certainly not the pursuit of money at this point. I think he realized we're here, and it's more interesting to spend time doing something that you find meaningful in your heart, and that's what he's doing.
It's almost like a drug. When you've done one successful thing, you want to do the other one, you want to come up with a new vision, you keep learning. It's just a way of being. He'll be bored on the beach.
It has to be a very big, world-changing goal for him to get up in the morning. That's just the way he's wired. So I don't expect that to stop.
I think it actually is going to make a difference to the world if we transition to sustainable transport sooner rather than later. We're not doing this because we thought it was like a way to get rich or anything. Like I said, I thought maybe 10% chance of success at the beginning. I thought I would just lose all my money, and almost did. So it's not like it was came very close to losing everything.
Falcon 9 has cleared the tower.
Having conquered cyberspace, Musk's next mission would focus on outer space. In 2002, he launched one of the most revolutionary businesses of our time, focused on shaking up the space industry.
The pivotal breakthrough that's necessary to make life multiplanetary is a fully and rapidly reusable orbit-class rocket. This is a very difficult thing to do because we live on a planet where that is just barely possible. In the last 12 months or so, I've come to the conclusion that it can be solved. And I think SpaceX is going to try to do it. We could fail. I'm not saying we're certain of success here, but we're going to try to do it.
He'd already been talking about energy and transportation and space. I was like, why space? He's like, space is cool. All right.
No one thought he could do what he's done when he first set out to achieve his goals. I mean, this random South African coming along in the 2000s and saying he wants to build a rocket that can land itself back on the ground, can take things to orbit for 10 times cheaper than anyone else. He was laughed at the room in most places.
They kind of ignored him at first, and then he kind of put his money where his mouth was, literally.
He famously went to Russia once to try and buy some rocket engines off them and was laughed out of the country, basically, by their engineers. So he came out to the US and he built his own rocket.
We were still used to NASA, space equals NASA. But when Elon Musk started to experiment with these new rockets, we realised that Elon Musk and SpaceX is a serious space player.
Everything looking good for the beginning of today's spacewalking tasks.
The first 3 SpaceX launches failed, which sparked skepticism in many investors.
Vehicle on course, on track. And we appear to have had a launch vehicle failure.
Spaceflight is a tricky business. I mean, it is definitely difficult, and I think we forget that sometimes. We see launches and landings as routine. It's a huge amount of energy and dangerous substances, and that work is very hard.
Look where we are today. The critics have been silenced.
Just 1 year after founding SpaceX, Musk invested in Tesla Motors, an electric car manufacturer aiming to produce a power-packed, zero-polluting car. Over the next several years, Tesla would take the lead in a niche market.
Our goal was to really try to create the best car in the world in order to show that an electric car can be the best car in the world. A lot of people have this perception that electric cars are compromised, that there are issues with electric cars, and that if you buy electric, it's because you have some sort of electric fetish. What I think is incredibly important is to break that perception and show that indeed an electric car can be better than any gasoline car.
Cars were always a big deal. He had that F1 McLaren show up very early on in the X.com days, and there was a Jaguar very soon after that, and he liked them all very much. Anything that was rare, expensive, and cool.
If you look at the revolution that's almost upon us in electric cars, Tesla was there first.
There's been various attempts to bringing electric cars which have failed because big car giants didn't want them to succeed.
Elon knew nothing about electric cars when he started out, but recognized that there was a problem there that needed to be solved, and has just bulldozed his way through it.
I'm really excited by the fact that we've got a zero-emission sports car that can go head-to-head with a Ferrari and a Porsche and win.
This is what's truly disruptive. A tech guy coming into the car space. Elon doesn't look at it as a car. It's a piece of software with a little bit of hardware attached to it. The driving experience in a Tesla, everybody's raving about it.
It was awesome. It was unbelievable. The acceleration is out of this world. It was like a roller coaster. I felt like I was going to fly or something.
It's quick, it's silent, but also with Teslas, it's the technology, the fact that they update themselves. I had a Tesla for a while, and I'll come out in the morning, software update, as your phone does, and you get stuff on your car that you didn't have the previous night. You can actually move your Tesla out of a parking spot with your smartphone. So it's just incredible. For somebody who's a car fan and a tech fan, then Teslas really do tick a lot of boxes.
The future is electric. In the future, we won't be filling up for petrol. Elon has understood that for a decade.
Already you're seeing countries across Europe, France, the UK, all saying they're going to ban the sale of petrol cars in the next 10, 20 years. And that's pretty much thanks to Tesla.
In the face of massively declining oil prices, I think it actually becomes more urgent that the auto manufacturers transition to electric and put a huge amount of effort behind their electric vehicle programs.
What's amazing is how the rest of the auto industry is sort of following.
They had this lithium-ion cell technology that other companies really couldn't match.
There isn't a car company in the world who isn't looking at an electric vehicle. There's probably not a car company in the world who hasn't taken a Tesla apart to see what's going on underneath.
At Tesla, we've open sourced our patents, so we're trying to be as helpful as possible for the advent of electric vehicles. We've also said that our supercharge network, we're happy to have other car makers use that network. We're really doing everything we can to accelerate the advent of sustainable cars.
I mean, now we know that GM and Land Rover have said they're going to start doing electric cars in the near future, just electric cars.
There's so many things that Tesla has done first, which has got every other car maker around the planet looking, thinking, yeah, we've got to do it like that, haven't we?
The fundamental problem is the rules today incent people to create carbon. And this is madness. And whatever you incent will happen. We need to send a clear message to the negotiating teams and to the politicians that this time there needs to be significant change.
An essential part of Elon Musk's tale of triumph is how close he came to complete disaster. By his own admission, 2008 was the worst year of his life. His companies were battered by the economic meltdown. 3 failed launches left SpaceX hanging in the balance, and Tesla was on the verge of bankruptcy. Elon was widely assumed to be finished.
He certainly has his ups and downs, and believe me, it has been lots of ups and downs.
He seems to have the media on his back almost permanently, but that seems to be the price of success.
In the early years, it really came down to a knife edge as to whether or not SpaceX was going to make it, whether or not it was going to go bankrupt. He was having to allocate resources and money between Tesla and SpaceX in order to keep them going. And it came down to having to borrow money from friends and family. And bear in mind, this is a man who made millions off a software sale earlier.
Elon Musk, he's had plenty of failures, failed rocket launches, and you have to go through this learning curve.
With the early rockets and all of that, he did seem to understand that the chances were they were going to blow up. But sometimes through your greatest failure, you make your greatest steps forward.
He just keeps going, he keeps pushing the boat out. It is just an insatiable appetite to just keep going, whatever happens. Yes is yes, maybe is yes, and a no is just a delayed yes.
There were a million places along the way where he could have stopped or been derailed or decided to go buy that island and just sit on it, but he didn't.
They're risk takers. They love it. They live to be on the knife edge. Failure is expected. Entrepreneurs don't expect necessarily to succeed all the time, which is a characteristic that makes them successful. Because when they do fail, and all entrepreneurs do because they take risks, they just brush it off. They have this phenomenal bounce back factor. Unlike other people who get absorbed by the failure and get stymied and they can't do anything else for a while, he can cope with failure. And to be able to bounce back and then go into another venture without blinking an eye is what it's all about.
With his companies on the brink of collapse, doom was averted at the last minute. Tesla was saved by investors, and SpaceX was awarded a $1.6 billion NASA contract.
The SpaceX team is incredible. They are really pushing the boundaries in terms of where we're going forward with exploration. I think humans are naturally driven to do this, and this is really the beginning, I think, of human beings leaving low Earth orbit. I certainly plan on being around to see that.
In 2010, Elon launched his Dragon spacecraft to the International Space Station. SpaceX became the first company to dock a private spacecraft with the ISS, which was, at the time, amazing.
This is Mission Control Houston, official hatch opening time for the SpaceX Dragon spacecraft.
Every bit of adrenaline in my body released at that point. It's obviously an extremely intense moment. Anything could have gone wrong and everything went right, fortunately. So I feel very lucky.
Don Pettit giving the thumbs up there, as well as the rest of the crew.
Elon Musk is developing a track record of delivering on what he says he will. So he already has developed reusable rockets. He is supplying the space station. The next stage will be to have versions of his Dragon spacecraft that are human rated. So he is actually delivering on his promise.
After his marriage to Justine had unravelled into divorce, Musk began dating British actress Tallulah Riley.
According to Justine, her divorce was finalized, and 6 weeks later, she found out Elon was married to someone else.
It was an extremely quick courting. He met her, courted her, and then asked to marry.
They went on to have a very wonderful but also very tempestuous relationship. They married, they divorced, they remarried, they announced a divorce, and they called off the divorce, and then they put the divorce back on. It's very difficult to keep track of Elon and Tallulah's ups and downs. They ended things in a very amicable fashion, and even now Tallulah says never, never say never. They could still end up back together again.
Over the next several years, Tesla would take the lead in the electric car market. Under Elon's leadership, the company is heralded as the great American auto industry success story of the century.
This is kind of crazy, but I just learned, just told that the total number of orders for the Model 3 in the past 24 hours has now passed 150,000.
His concerns about climate change and sustainability is what's behind all of this push towards an electric car, not just a fancy Tesla, but also a mid-range car that for $35,000 or less that everybody can drive.
When the Model 3 was launched, there were something like 400,000 people who put money down. That's unheard of in the car industry. You might have some waiting lists, but to wait that long for a relatively affordable car is something we haven't seen before.
You can see the line has been building up ever since we got here, so it's like a never-ending line. And some tourists actually came up to me and asked what this was. And then I said it was Tesla, and they knew about it.
Tesla famously doesn't advertise. I don't think it needs to. There's such a buzz about the brand.
Things are on track to be able to meet the Model 3 start of production timing in the middle of next year. And really excited about what's happening.
Tesla's value is something that has a lot of people scratching their heads. The fact that it's a company that's not making money, but yet it has a huge value.
If you look at the revenues to market cap of the car maker Honda and the value to revenue on Tesla, Honda would be trading at about 0.5 times, Tesla would be trading about 7.4 times today. So Tesla is obviously valued a lot more given the little revenue that it produces. Why? Because there's a lot of goodwill in the stock. And that's because Elon has a fan club in the investment community. And that access to capital, that goodwill, that brand, if you like, is wonderful for Elon because that does allow him to get on with other things, such as the Boring Company or his AI ambitions or whatever else crazy frontier-driven ideas he comes up with next.
The reputation Tesla has is as much to do with the product as the guy that's running the company. Frankly, if the cars weren't any good, people wouldn't buy them. But they are good, they are technology leaders, and that's what really gets the following. The fact that there's a guy like Elon running the company as well is the icing on the cake.
The general public really appreciate that sort of candid approach to how he's running his companies.
What keeps me intrigued about Musk is that if you look closely, you can see his signature in the products that he makes. So, for example, the Tesla sound system goes up to 11. It's a reference to Spinal Tap.
The ludicrous mode, the warp speed that you get on the screen when you unlock an Easter egg for extra performance. It's those little details that car companies don't normally do, but Tesla just have a bit of fun with them. It's not yet like Knight Rider because the car doesn't talk back at you. You can't have a conversation with it. But when it comes to autonomous technology, Tesla is certainly one of the leaders out there.
If people want electric cars, fine. But you see, through electric cars comes what? Driverless cars. Now, when you see some of the things that have happened with driverless cars and you see how computers can go wrong, well, you know, I'm not sure I will want to be in a driverless car.
People are quite keyed off of the whole autonomous vehicle thing. I think maybe people have this like image of like robot cars run amok. It's really not anything like that. All of that autopilot software goes through extreme levels of validation before a customer ever sees it. So there's all sorts of nonsense about people being used as human guinea pigs. You know, it's basically advanced driver's assistance at this point. In fact, we use the name autopilot because that's what's used in aircraft. But the presumption in aircraft is that the pilot must, you know, pay attention, be alert, and be ready to take over any time. Not that the pilot can then go to sleep or, you know, walk away from the cockpit.
Musk is confronting some of the world's biggest challenges head-on. Through Tesla, he intends to reduce our use of fossil fuels, while simultaneously attempting to revolutionize the energy industry. A key part of his aim is to change not just energy consumption, but energy production. Elon is the chairman of Solar City, one of the largest producers of solar power systems in the United States.
People in a remote village or an island somewhere can take solar panels, combine it with the Tesla Powerwall, and never have to worry about having electricity lines. Electricity lines are not the most pretty thing in the world. So being able to have this solution just works wherever you are. The fact that it's wall-mounted is vital because it means you don't need to have a battery room. It means that a normal household can mount this on their garage or on the outside wall of their house. and it doesn't take up any room. You can actually go, if you want, completely off-grid. You can take your solar panels, charge the battery packs, and that's all you use. And the cost of this is $3,500. Oh wow, the grid, it's actually zero. This entire night has been powered by batteries.
With the Solar City company that's now part of Tesla, Elon's trying to make solar panels more attractive to the mass market. They launched their new solar roof technology, whereas in the old days, solar panels would be big, black, bulky squares that you'd put out on your roof or your garden. Now people are going to be able to have solar panels embedded into their roof.
Tesla's lithium-ion battery installed in South Australia led to a massive drop in the costs of backing up the region's power supply. The system, powered by wind turbines, reduced the price of power outages by 90%.
They are taking the surplus electricity that's being produced in Australia and storing it and putting it back to the grid. I think the latest estimates suggest they're making up to $1 million a day from the electricity they're storing, which is pretty impressive.
That came from a bet that he made over Twitter. So it was an Australian businessman, and they were discussing about the feasibility of making a city run on solar power. And a bet was issued to Musk about, can you do it in this much time? And he went, I'll take that bet. Put the batteries in place, had it up and running within the time scale, all for a billionaire's bet, and that's what came of it.
We have reached an agreement with Tesla Motor Company, subject to legislative review and approval, that will enable Tesla to build the world's largest and most advanced battery factory right here in the Silver State.
Why do we even call it the Gigafactory? It's because it's actually going to be, it's not just going to be the biggest lithium-ion battery factory in the world, but it'll actually be bigger than the sum of all lithium-ion factories in the world. So it's difficult to quite describe in words, but it's a heck of a big factory.
Since the Dragon launch, Elon Musk has continued to make history with SpaceX. When the Falcon Heavy rocket launched in February 2018, it heralded the start of a new space race.
This is a big deal. This is kind of the Super Bowl of rocket launches.
Elon Musk and his team just proved that the Falcon Heavy works, which puts us now in a completely different realm. What we can put into deep space, what we can send to Mars.
Lifting off from the same launch pad that sent the crew of Apollo 11 to the moon, the mission represented a new era in the progress of spaceflight.
The launch of the SpaceX Falcon Heavy was significant for so many reasons. Scientifically, I mean, it's the most powerful rocket we've seen launched since the Saturn V, which took humans to the moon.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
We are entering a new era of space exploration, which is extremely exciting.
Sort of the continuance of the dream of Apollo.
I was on the Space Coast for the launch. I haven't seen it that busy there since 2011 when the Space Shuttle launched and landed for the final time. It really has started to capture people's imaginations about space exploration.
It was a great achievement by a private company to create and successfully launch one of the biggest lifting rockets ever in history.
It's the third largest rocket ever to be launched. We had the Apollo Saturn V, of course we had the shuttle. The Falcon Heavy is that order of magnitude. It is a seriously big rocket.
The Falcon Heavy can carry 64 tons. That's a lot. I mean, it's a truck.
It's the equivalent of a 737 jetliner filled with passengers, filled with baggage, filled with fuel, lifting that up and sending it into space. And not just sending it into space, sending it beyond low Earth orbit, sending it beyond the moon, sending it beyond Mars.
This launch will also have political implications, in my view, because the American government is preparing and budgeting for NASA's rockets. But the fact that Elon and SpaceX have now proven they can successfully launch the Falcon Heavy, which will probably have a cost at about $100 million, That's about 10% of the NASA rocket. So they are budgeting about $1 billion per launch. That's a significant cost saving. And that is what private enterprise can do when you put the right person at the helm and you give him a chance to execute his vision.
In order for us to really open up access to space, we've got to achieve full and rapid reusability. And being able to do that for the primary rocket booster is going to be a huge impact on cost. It'll still take us a few years to make that smooth and make it efficient, but I think it's proven that it can work.
Of all Musk's innovations, developing reusable rockets could be the most radical.
We thought it was more likely than not that this mission would work, but still probably 1/3 chance of failure.
The holy grail for space is to have a totally reusable launch system. So to actually see the SpaceX Falcon rockets launching its spacecraft into orbit and then coming back down and performing a pinpoint accurate landing on a floating platform at sea, that is pretty astonishing.
It's quite a tiny target. It's really trying to land on a postage stamp there.
Just to put it this way, you get on an aeroplane and you fly somewhere, you wouldn't dream of throwing that aeroplane away, so why do we do the same with space rockets? That's what SpaceX is trying to do, and they're succeeding. They're leading the way at the moment.
Elon's getting people to question why NASA is still building any rockets at all. They think if SpaceX can do it, why do we need to build a comparable rocket? We can just buy that one of them.
Inside the Falcon Heavy rocket was a plaque with 6,000 names of all the SpaceX employees that worked on the project. And that just shows that he's willing to really value the people that work for him.
Elon Musk's aspiration is to eventually put all of his efforts into developing far larger rockets, which can still launch payloads into Earth orbit, but also be capable of taking human-rated spacecraft into deep space, i.e. Mars.
You have like a 10 to 20 year horizon here where you want to go to Mars.
I want to enable large numbers of people and cargo to go to Mars. So it's not sort of about me personally wanting to make a journey to Mars. I mean, that would be nice on a personal level, but I do think it is important that we as a species, as a civilization, are on a path to become a true spacefaring civilization and a multi-planet species.
Musk aims to launch a mission to Mars by 2022.
Elon Musk's ultimate goal is to have humans permanently living and working on Mars, a Martian colony, you could say.
Mars is very special. It has a sky and it has landscape and large amounts of frozen water, and it has seasons. So there are a lot of similarities to Earth.
The atmosphere is much thinner than Earth's atmosphere, but you've got carbon and then you've got oxygen, so you could potentially use what's on Mars's atmosphere as resources.
It's a very terrestrial environment. It appears to be a home from home, but is it?
It is possible in our lifetime to send a rocket to Mars, manned. I do think that's possible. Do we want to do it? Do we want to pay for it? That's a different question.
There's a lot of questions, there's a lot of hurdles, but as long as something doesn't break the fundamental laws of physics, we can do it.
Mars is reachable, and I'm sure we will devise the means by which we can live there. But there are many questions and challenges before that can be achieved.
So let Musk say he's going to do it, because he probably will.
If he maintains this momentum, I see no reason why he shouldn't be landing spacecraft on Mars.
Elon Musk's involvement with design, engineering, and critical technical decisions is unique amongst his peers.
Believe me, Elon's just as smart on engineering as he is on the money side. Even in the earlier days of Tesla and SpaceX, he could easily have said, let me put in some of my cash in there and we'll put some clever technical people and I'll just run it. I'll be the manager, I'll be the CEO or whatever. To actually be able to get so involved on the engineering side, that's amazing. But that's what he did, because deep down he is an engineer.
I would say he approaches engineering and business in much the same fashion. It's a puzzle to be dissected and then the pieces put back together in some way.
At his heart, the man is an engineer. I think that's where his first love is. He'll be walking around SpaceX and we'll talk to the employees and then we'll quiz them on things like thrust vectors or aerodynamical design. Not typical CEO behavior.
I think the engineering came more naturally because the engineering part is a more rational approach. He sort of struggled early on in the CEO role of his two early companies, but certainly we've seen that he just learned and grew from that. And so I think, he's sort of the whole package at this point. I don't think too many people would argue with that.
Some entrepreneurs are more socially skilled than others, but they're not necessarily socially skilled because they're too focused. See, if you're a socially skilled human being, then you're sensitive to everybody around you. But that may prevent you from actually getting on to achieve your objective. And they have objectives in mind, and they are ruthless in the sense of trying to achieve that objective. Not ruthless in the way they treat other people necessarily, just in making sure that they're on their own timeline to achieve that objective.
I had made an enormous PR mistake, and it had landed on the front page of the New York Post. And it was bad. It was mortifyingly bad. And when I went in to tell Elon about it, he was very, very angry with me. And the thing that he said that stuck with me was, Julie, perception becomes reality. It was the only time that he was really, really angry with me that I can remember. And the fact that he didn't fire me, I think, just points to him being a nice guy.
One of the things I find so fascinating about Elon is that in the midst of all of his acumen and business sense, he does interviews where he tears up and even cries, talking about how he wants to find the one.
It's not easy being Elon. It sounds amazing, sounds glamorous, and it no doubt is also a lot of fun. He's having a ball, executing his engineering dreams. The flip side of that, coming to the personal side, it ain't easy.
Elon started dating a very famous celebrity actress who was at the time at war with her ex-husband Johnny Depp. I don't know what it is about Amber, but men who fall in love with Amber, they fall hard for Amber. So everyone was very curious in the showbiz world to see who Amber would end up with next. And when we saw she was with a billionaire who had this kind of baby face, there was a lot of interest in finding out more. The breakup between Elon and Amber was very painful for Elon, and he, very characteristically, I suppose, is very open with people and journalists about how much he was hurting. At one stage, in a very high-profile interview he did with Rolling Stone, he actually asked the journalist who's doing the story, do you know anybody you could set me up with? Is there anybody you know I should date? For a billionaire guy who is, let's be honest, decently good-looking, to be out there talking about how he wants to find a nice girlfriend, it's just something you don't see come along very often.
He's fairly an open book, so if they had been spending some time together and the journalist had earned his trust in some capacity, it wouldn't surprise me at all. He definitely wears his heart on his sleeve. I would say he's a big softie underneath.
I mean, Elon is so honest and vulnerable, and I think that's why people find him so incredibly endearing. There are a lot of technological dreams that Elon Musk would have for himself over the next 2 decades. But I think as much as he wants all of that, I think Elon Musk would like to be happily in love.
Musk continues to invest in the future. In 2013, he outlined a potential world-changing plan for a transportation system that could reshape the way humanity travels.
Elon Musk came up with the idea. He published a white paper on this vacuum transport, but let it go. He said, I'm not going to do this myself. What I'm going to do is open it up to third-party companies that want to develop it themselves.
The Hyperloop project is of huge interest in terms of the world of transportation. The idea of going from San Francisco to Los Angeles in the time it would take to drive from San Francisco to the edge of San Francisco is fantastic.
It's a vacuum tube where all the air is sucked out of the tube, and you send a pod containing passengers through the tube. There's no friction, there's no air resistance, because the pods are levitating on magnets.
The technology is sound. We can travel faster in a vacuum, there's no friction. They want to get up to speeds about 500 to 700 miles an hour.
Elon's idea is that these tubes could connect major cities, and you could travel in one of these passenger pods and travel from, say, LA to New York in a matter of half an hour.
When he was talking about the first time, we all thought, oh, well, this time he might have lost it a little bit, or it's a little bit too ambitious or too crazy. But as with many other of Elon's ideas, watch that space, because before you know it, and actually ahead of schedule, this thing is actually becoming reality.
The speed we can put these tunnels out is dramatic, how fast it can all happen. So I think a lot of the world will be connected.
We will be moving cargo in 2019. We think we can have passengers safely being transported in Hyperloop by 2021.
Elon Musk is a leading voice on the potential of an AI apocalypse. He has declared that digital superintelligence is the most serious threat to the survival of the human race. To offset this, he launched Neuralink, aimed at developing safe and beneficial artificial intelligence.
The dangers of AI are the end of the human mind as we know it.
You're dealing with something that's fundamentally going to be smarter than you, and it's going to learn on its own. So how do you stay ahead of it? That's something that Musk is paying close attention to.
His main concern is that if AI becomes too smart and too important, then why do you need humans? We kind of become obsolete.
The very worst nightmare that a Hollywood horror movie could ever come up with is as nothing compared with where we're heading, and heading so fast. When AI has the ability to think, to come to conclusions, and to make judgments, etc., just like the human mind, does anyone think there might be just the slightest chance that through that alone, AI could take the planet over?
If they do become self-aware, how are we going to control them? Who's going to control the controllers? It's a scary prospect.
What is its potential to take over everything? You know what its potential to take over everything is? 100%. It's the end of humanity.
When software rises up and becomes all-powerful, where are we going to look to? We're going to look to the titans of industry to provide a counterweight. Elon's ideally placed to be the sort of counterpoint to this software-only vision. I mean, it's interesting that he's also looking into AI himself with OpenAI and Neuralink.
When I hear Elon Musk talking about the fact that AI revolution is humanity summoning the demon, absolutely it is. But then founding and opening a company called Neuralink to connect AI to the human brain. I mean, that contradiction is so extraordinary. I don't know the thought processes that must be going on there.
Neuralink is a direct response of Elon's concerns to AI in the first place. The fact that he thinks AI might surpass humans in terms of its mental capabilities. It makes sense that he would try and develop technology using computers in tandem with our biology.
I think that Elon Musk wants to use AI as a tool for augmenting ourselves and not a tool for replacing ourselves.
I think he's saying if you can't beat them, become superhuman and then beat them.
Brain-computer interfaces could help people in two different ways. So one way would be to restore capabilities for people with disabilities, and another application would be to go beyond our limitation. And so, for example, we could think about controlling a computer just with our thoughts, without moving any muscle, and that's the core function of a BCI, a brain-computer interface. So there are a lot of different scenarios in which you could apply this technology. We are talking about critical decision-making in the military, in a warfare scenario, or in a health sector. So whenever we talk about hybrid humans or human and machine or cyborgs, we are all talking about the same thing, I think, which is using technology to augment our capabilities. And that's it.
Musk's skepticism about the potential risks of AI technology has led to a public clash with Mark Zuckerberg.
I am optimistic about the future of AI. I think that AI is going to unlock a huge amount of positive things, whether that's helping to identify and cure diseases, to help cars drive more safely, to help keep our communities safe. Are there going to be issues along the way? Of course there are. No technology comes out fully formed, and we need the pioneers to be able to go work on this and get to the state that we want.
I do think it's very healthy that we have such technology giants fighting it out publicly so that we can all form an opinion about it.
It's a spectator sport now for the rest of us.
Mark Zuckerberg sees Elon as a naysayer and someone who's trying to stop the development of AI. I can see both sides of the argument. I'd probably side slightly with Mark Zuckerberg in the sense that I think we will be able to control AI enough to keep humanity safe.
I wouldn't bet against Elon. You know, if Elon thinks that AI is going to take over and eventually decide that us irrational humans are unnecessary, I would trust him. You know, he hasn't been wrong about a lot.
The debate is either it's a good thing, we must do it, it's a bad thing, but we still must do it in another way. We should stop doing it immediately before the line is crossed where humanity is no more.
We need policies. We need to start thinking what is a good application of BCI and what is not. We need to be the one with the control, being able to push a button and disable the AI at any moment.
Artificial intelligence can generate quite successful content. However, rather than replacing humans, I prefer to see us working together. We both bring unique skills and talents to the table.
There's going to be a difference between what's doable and what's acceptable. And this is something that Elon is not going to decide. This is something that Mark Zuckerberg is not going to decide. This is you and I and everybody else. And hopefully that will be translated eventually into legislation.
Elon Musk's assertion that we're likely to be living in a simulated reality has popularized a theory debated by philosophers and now gaining supporters in Silicon Valley.
Elon Musk has said that we're living in some kind of computer 3D simulation. I don't know if that means we're in the Matrix or some kind of a Matrix. And, you know, as bizarre and crazy as that sounds, Elon has been saying bizarre and crazy things that turned out to be true for a long time now. So I would say, maybe.
Well, you never know, do you?
Well, disprove it. We can't disprove it. We could be of lower intelligence and there could be another species far, far, far more intelligent than us, and they're almost playing God with us. It sounds ridiculous to say something like that, but we don't know much. We've barely left our own planet.
I felt like what he was saying was that this is not base reality. And so I would agree with him on that front. You get labeled crazy because you're pushing the boundaries of what people expect. He's coming at it from a scientific perspective, but that idea that there's only one true reality and this isn't it is actually the underpinnings of all the ancient religions of the world. All of those point to exactly the same thing that he's saying, so I'm with him.
I've been saying in my books for a lot longer than Elon Musk that we live in the equivalent of a massively advanced virtual reality computer game in the end. And when you look at the evidence, it is overwhelming, certainly immensely compelling. And this is why not just Elon Musk, many scientists now are coming out and saying, actually, it does look like that.
Ultimately, for me, it seems to be a bit of an improvable theory. I mean, how are we going to prove that we're living in a simulation? I don't know.
Don't discount his wacko ideas, because suddenly they do pop up in one shape or another. But I'm not sure about that one. I think we have to see more meat on the bone on that one.
I just think it's interesting that Musk is able to put something like that out there and show that what others might consider a bit of a ridiculous thought or might be worried about being ridiculed for, he's actually giving serious thought to. And I think what Musk is always looking to do is to foster a discussion.
Inspired by frustrations of sitting in a traffic jam, Musk's solution was the Boring Company. In 2018, the company was selected to build a high-speed underground transportation system in Chicago.
I'd like to thank the mayor and the mayor's office and the city of Chicago for having the faith to bet on the Boring Company. We think we're going to really be very good at boring.
You could almost say that Elon has the Midas touch, because when he started the Boring Company, which is really about boring under the earth as opposed to being dull, he actually started selling baseball caps online before he did anything else and literally made $1 million. You know, this is a guy who everything he touches turns to gold.
He's kept us all interested because he's started tweeting out offers of hats and flamethrowers. We're all interested to see what's going to happen with it.
This is a difficult thing that we're doing. It's a hard thing. It's a new thing. And, you know, I'd hope that you cheer us on for this, you know, because if we succeed, it's going to be a great thing for the city. And if we fail, well, I guess me and others will lose a bunch of money.
Elon Musk is one of the great engineering minds of our time. He is one of the great business leaders and entrepreneurs of our time. And he's one of the great visionaries of our time.
Elon will be remembered as one of the guys who was unafraid to say, what else?
I think his greatest achievement is inspiring humanity to think bigger, to dream bigger.
In a world where there's so many problems, isn't it nice to have a positive story occasionally?
We're all just sort of sitting back and watching what's going to come out next.